Okay, again, coalfields. Let me try and quickly go through the coalfields and trees evidence and then move on to an experiment that deals with the one major problem in mining that kills people. Okay, we're going to start in Alaska. Yes, right out in the bush. Up there, you carry your your magnums and all these sort of things. It's wilderness country. You fly in, you fly out, you explore all of this stuff. Old coal mines way up north, freezing place, fossil trees, no roots, no branches. In the coal seams, fossil trees in Tennessee. That was the first one I ever saw. It's just on the border of Tennessee and Kentucky. Notice why they're called polystrates. Poly means many. Strata, yep, they go through multiple strata. Now, when you have a look, there's the most famous ones, the ones I first flew deliberately to Nova Scotia to see. Many layers, coal seam at the bottom. There's one I went back to see. These are famous. Charles Lyell and some of the early people were very interested in seeing these. Oh, here's the ones that have been known about for ages, didn't have that name for a long time. Yellow hat, tree. Notice the coal down the outside of the tree. No coal inside this tree, just on the outside. And clay in abundance. Well, here's me in Australia with a polystrate tree. I took Joseph to see this one. But these are pine trees, the ones that don't grow in swamps, the ones that the first explorers in Australia noticed and noted there was no pine leaves at the bottom of the tree. These didn't grow here, they washed in. Back to Alaska. Notice there's no branches, no roots. Now, I climbed up and down this. I couldn't get to this one, but you'll notice one thing. That's my long distance camera, the best I had at the time. You'll have a tree with no branches and no roots. It didn't grow there. So the normal sort of story that they were buried slowly is rubbish. You'll also see on the outside the coal. The bark has turned to coal, but on the inside it's petrified. Now that's a tree. There's yours truly in his Alaskan sort of warm gear, giving you an idea of some of the size of these trees. Look at that. We began to dig these trees out. No, not to take it home, but to show you some interesting things. No roots, even on the big ones. Look, prove it to you. I'm sorry for my tea cozy hat, but they didn't have beanies big enough for us guys over here. It kept me warm regardless. So notice the trees are all broken. These are the results of trees coming from somewhere else on a huge scale. The bottoms are broken. Okay, there's clay here. There's coal here. There's trees here. And in the days when it was running, black coal and brown coal are found in huge flood-formed deposits around the globe, and there's always a serious issue when you're mining. Like that dump we made in Canada, they give off methane, and they've got cautionary signs. The old keeping the budgerigar in the mine was used for exactly that, detecting when the gas came out. Observe this New South Wales fossil polystrate tree. Yep, I took Joseph to see these. Pine trees, Araucaria trees. Would you be allowed to ask, was this formed during Noah's flood? Now, I challenge any of you university students, why don't you ask your professor that question, see how he reacts? Because my professor actually would have said, no, you can't do this. Make your next uni thesis on the value of Noah's flood and modern sedimentary deposits in Earth history. Global deposits of coal. Yep, you can follow the Jurassic sediments around. They're pretty much 180 degrees of the Earth's surface. The Carboniferous ones are even bigger. That's the big coal deforming ones. And they're all leaking methane. Okay, what's the problem? There's the first problem you need to admit to. Whether it's Ravi or George out there, scientific theories don't exist in absolute isolation. They're explanations about aspects of nature, and at present, the key rule is they are done without reference to God. You can refer to Lyell, you can refer to Darwin, you can refer to John Mackay, but you can't refer to God. Why not? There's the man who's the cause of it, Charles Lyell. Oh, he's really a bigger problem than Charles Darwin. He gave geologists and uniformitarianists and archaeologists that way of thinking. Whatever carbon-14 is doing, it's always done. The present is the key to the past. But he had a hidden aim. My aim is to get rid of Moses out of science. Now, I bet they didn't teach you that in geology. You see, any answer is allowable of why birds fly so well, except the fact that God created them on the fifth day. You've got to get rid of Moses. That means you've got to get rid of believing that God could make the universe and he did it without reference to time or place. He invented time. Okay, there's a key point for this issue. It's not the evidence that disagrees with the biblical record of creation and Noah's flood over the last 6,000 years. It's the opinions of men who willfully set out to reject and replace the word of God. Now, because we've just dealt with anthropology and legends in the Middle East, to confirm what I thought was happening, I went to one of the leading professors in Australia who was an expert in ancient Middle Eastern semantics and Semitics. Okay, and I asked him, what about the dates you put on the Babylon, on some of these pyramids? And I said, where do you get those dates from? And he said, well, actually, it's because in Babylon, there's the rising of the moon at a particular part of the year. And he said, we work backwards from the present. And the only time that could have happened was several thousand years before the Bible would have existed. And I said, well, what happened if the world's axis was changed in Noah's flood? Which is a tough question for someone who doesn't believe in Noah's flood. Well, I said, if the axis has ever moved, that would throw that date out completely. And Babylon would come a lot closer to the present, the opinions of men. And I asked him, could you fit the whole of biblical history into the data without doing that? He said, yes. He said, but we don't want to. You catch it? That's so important. Now, we mentioned before, go to our Q&A or our fact file, search for flood, ark, coal, etc. I was going to give you the questions, save them now, because this bit is the key. I've mentioned clay. I've mentioned coal. I've mentioned methane. Methane is explosive. Fossils. I've showed you some fossils in limestone, but that's not limestone, that's clay. You see, the best fossils are usually just below or just above the coal seam. That's the ones that are still whole. The ones in the coal are actually chewed up into black carboniferous carbon material. They're still there. You can see them under a microscope, but they don't look like that anymore. Clay, well, here's what I've discovered. If you set ferns on a block of clay, then it carbonizes. No, see, that's 2020. That's when we started that experiment, and that picture is taken within several months of the fern just sitting there. Notice one thing. Here's where it started. There's where it finished. It didn't take 1,000,000 years to carbonize. Now, we don't have time today, but I've gone through, I pulled the fern fossils out of the coal. They look exactly the same. We've set this on fire and it smells like coal. You might laugh at that, but we sent to world experts, what's the definitive test for coal? They said, when you set it on fire, it smells like coal. Nothing else actually has that odor. It happens also on the inside. I mean, there's two plants, and the one was put as just sitting on the outside, and then see that really black one? That we covered in clay on the top and the bottom. Man, look at the difference. The carbonization of the one that was on the inside is way ahead of the one on the outside. That's why we have a Jurassic Ark. And for those of you who are in Australia, we have Jurassic Ark visits every few weeks. Why don't you sign up and come and join us? I'll be at Gympie today speaking at a seminar. I'll be there tomorrow morning at the Church of Christ as well. Or come and join Craig and I when we have our official openings of the finally, post-COVID museum in Tasmania at the start of September. Okay, now that's making coal, and we can prove that's what we've done. But what about the stuff that comes off it? One plastic bag, one object inside it, put clay inside it. And some plants just carbonize, but some swell the bag. Do you notice what's happening? Gas is coming off. And it's filling the bag, not in millions of years, not in hundreds of years. It's just coming off as you almost hold the bag. Or in this case, we used an organic source, which is providing gas. We used a mullet. Now, mullet is full of oil, and we've been trying to make oil and make coal and make gas. Some things on clay just go straight to gas. Grass does that. Okay, By the way, we keep the records of dates and times and places. And if you want to see a smelly pile of plastic bags, then go and look at the mullet heap. And I tell you what, when you actually make bags of grass, they don't just turn into gas, they turn into heaps of gas. And we record all sorts of things like how much clay, how much water. There's 100 grams of clay, 200 mils of water, 20 grams. And look, after a week, it's already swelling. Well, how do we prove this is the same gas coming off in methane and not just smelly putrefaction? It can certainly blow your bags up. It can be dangerous. So here is our first test. We love to photograph everything. 1 bucket of water, because if the gas explodes, we need some water to keep the flames out. But because there's gas in the tin, we had to weigh it down. Yes, I know, high-tech equipment. It's amazing what you can achieve. 1 blue plastic bucket. Punch a hole in the lid and set the bubbles on fire. That's what was happening. The gas is coming out in bubbles, by the way. We couldn't get in our primitive equipment to come out any other way, but it certainly is interesting. You see the lighter at the bottom? You see the flume of gas coming off? Wow, we actually have made methane. And you know what was interesting? It was without any odor at all. No sulfur was being released. Sometimes you get sulfur in coal and it ruins the coal, but this had been made on pure clay, and it was pure, non-smelly methane. And we even could set the bubbles on fire because it started to give off bubbles. Have you ever seen a burning bubble? Perhaps there's a new weapon there somewhere, because the orange and red and yellow actually tell you the temperature's way up in the 700s and 800s. Quite remarkable. Oh, and look at the next bag. Well, it worked. We've made methane. We've made it for free. Glass clippings, a pile of clay, and a plastic bag. Well, maybe not for free, maybe 5 cents for the plastic bag and the sealant. We've made methane, and it explodes. Or the actual explosive level of methane, it only needs 4% oxygen in. Can you see now why when you have a coal mine and you strike a methane patch, you don't need much oxygen to actually blow yourself up? Pretty dangerous stuff. So therefore, we set a more, any of you want to invest in something, this is one coming up great. We made our gas making machine. Yeah, what are we using? Water, clay, and grass. And we're trying to get it to work properly and to work safely. That's one of the old-fashioned gas storage units like they used to use in England and America, particularly during the war. Water is used as a safety basis. Well, there it is, full of clay and grass. Oh, I won't explain how it works, but its job is to fill the one on the side. Look at the bubbles starting to come off. Fantastic. They're bubbles of methane. Okay, so there's the gas, the first gas we generated. Then we filled up the balloon and we put it in the tin and we set it on fire. We are making methane. Any of you out there who want to invest in this, we have a really green, simple, cheap, room temperature. You don't need to heat this. You don't need to add any chemical additives. This works really well. Perhaps I could heat up Jurassic Ark with man-made grass clippings. Amazing. Well, that is Jurassic Ark. Beautiful scenery, isn't it? But you see, there's what's just happened. Last week, the EU Parliament declared fossil fuel to be green energy as climate change narrative collapses. Well, that's a fascinating statement. You do know, by the way, that the world at the moment is running on coal and oil. No matter how green we try to be, we've just buried tons and tons of those big, the wind generators, all the blades. We can't recycle them at the moment, not very green. But when we first released our stuff on this gas, it drew opposition from the greenies. I would have thought you can make it with no energy, you don't have to heat this up. No, they weren't interested because their real motive was evolution. Their real motive was, we want to be in charge. We don't want to be able to say, you don't need millions of years to make coal. Look, they can make it at Jurassic Ark in a few months. You don't need millions of years to make gas. It is recyclable because they make it at Jurassic Ark in 2 weeks. So any of you interested in investing, we've got trusts set up in England. In America, you can donate even tax deductibly to that. And we are looking forward to, well, not saying told you so, but saying God even knew what would happen after the flood, and he's made a world where we could survive to the best if we exercise the one thing that's imperative and a part of creation, but not a part of evolution. In creation, we are given authority by God to exercise dominion over the planet, including over your grass clippings, including over your coal, including over your oil. So make sure you do that. Get in touch with us now. Have a look at our Q&A. Go to our fact file.